I will come to you when you are in the silence. Once again I will write upon your heart, and I'll meet you deep inside your inner castle, where together we can take the fear apart. And you've no idea just how much I've missed you. I've been waiting many lifetimes for your call, and I will sing my song of love for those who hear, and I will sing
Good morning and Om Shanti. Welcome, sisters. Sister Belinda, Sister Fatima.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sister Usha.
Good morning,
So,
everyone.
thank you for that beautiful song. I was just thinking it's really lovely that we can see through these eyes ourselves, but there's something else that has a bigger vision on us as well. But today, let's just think about something that I was looking at. You know, when we look at the soul, we were saying it's light and it's so invisible, it's behind the scenes. And yet, if something is sort of like nothing, how does it make me function? So, what are your thoughts on finding out how, to really get to know how, as a being, I function inside of this body so that I can be making decisions, I can be creating, I can actually develop even a persona that defines me. So, sisters, how can we explore this morning?
Sister Fatima, would you like to start?
Firstly, I'm also just checking. I put my earphones on. Is the sound a bit better now?
Sound is good from this side.
Okay, no, my voice. Remember, it was not too good yesterday. Or it was just when I was doing the meditation.
Only during the meditation it
Okay.
was quiet. So maybe shall I start? I was waiting for Sister Fatima, but not sure if she's
she is there, but I think she's still trying to get on.
Okay. Yes, today's topic is so interesting and follows on so beautifully, actually, from yesterday. You know, if we get introduced to someone and the next day we bump into them, we can greet them, but we can never say that we know them. We just know what they look like. And so yesterday we were introduced to the idea of this amazing, subtle being. But now our task is really to get to know who we are, because we're all unique, and how we got to be who we are. Because generally we kind of think it's a cosmic accident. So today we're really going to put the soul under the magnifying glass, in a sense, and start to work out how the soul actually becomes who it is. And if we are dissatisfied with some of those things, how we can actually bring about a change within the self. Often people say a leopard cannot change its spots, but at the Brahma Kumaris we always say actually anyone can change. And today we'll look more deeply at the recipe for that. So there are three things that stand out when we look at the soul. And sometimes we call them the three faculties of the soul. But they're not faculties as in our physical faculties. They are subtle and invisible, but they do show up in our expression. And of course, the soul is always expressing through the physical body. So the first one is the mind. And the mind is so important for us. And for the most part, it's really seems to be out of our control. Someone told me that we have about 90,000 thoughts every single day. But if I ask you how many of those thoughts you remember from yesterday, probably not too many. So this gives us an indication of how the mind, in a sense, is on its own tangent. And this is not good news for us, because the condition of our mind dictates so many other things which are really important. So maybe now, Sister Fatima is there. Do you like to share some thoughts on this, Sister Fatima?
I was still listening to you. Are you done?
Yeah, I think I'll pause there. Thanks.
When I was thinking about the mind, what came to mind was that sometimes physically we confuse the brain with the mind. And yet they are two separate entities. And that the mind is an organ of the soul. And as such, we create thoughts through the mind. And in a sense, it is one of the most important organs in the soul because of what you're saying. You know, we have so many thoughts per day. And everything that we perceive outside through the eyes goes to the mind first. And it's in the mind where we have the memory track, where everything is kept. And sometimes I use this term that everything that happens in this birth is like the library. It goes to the library. And everything else that has happened before is in the archives. And so we need to pay so much attention to what the mind picks up through our sense organs on a daily basis. And this is what becomes the biggest challenge in sustaining this path that we're on.
You know, Sister Fatima, as you're speaking, it just reminds me that when the senses pick up different information, the mind is like a screen that is starting to reflect everything. And so everything we see, we hear, we feel, we touch actually becomes a thought. And that's why your thought about almost 90,000 thoughts a day is so possible, that we are creating those thoughts. But each of those thoughts then get converted into a feeling. And then what happens to us? We are now addressing everything we feel, everything we hear, everything we touch. All of those thoughts are now in our minds. And sometimes it feels like the mind actually has a crowd of people, like a fish market, and everyone's bargaining and, you know, talking, and everyone's trying to get the attention of somebody else. And so sometimes we can be doing no work at all, but just, you know, when we realize what's happening in the mind, we can feel completely exhausted. And this is one of the things that people do experience, you know, that feeling of being tired. And it's not coming from work, but this overthinking that is happening. And it's really something that we all try to do, to say that, you know, we need to not think so much. But you really can't change the way we're thinking at mind level. It's a much deeper thing. The mind is only reflecting what you said, whether it's the archives or the recordings, it is bringing to the surface. And so at the end of the day, when we look at what's happening in the mind, and that's why reflection is so beautiful, is that when we reflect what's happening in the mind and catch the feelings, it's giving us an indication what we're absorbing throughout the day. And so the first step, even before we can get into any deep meditation, is to just give ourselves a little bit time and look at the screen of the mind and see what's coming, in which direction I'm focusing. And so yesterday, when we were thinking about this idea of looking at myself separate from the body, that first step of just being aware that I'm more than the body and then creating thoughts based on that can make such a big difference to my day. Something else that's very important about our mind is that not only does it create thoughts, which results to feelings, but it also has the faculty of imagining. And so that's why one thought can take me into a tangent and I can go and create a whole new story altogether. So the mind is really a very powerful aspect of ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Sorry.
Continue.
No, and that kind of leads us on then to the next faculty, which of course is the intellect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And when we define the intellect, we always say that it's our ability to understand and therefore discern and make decisions. And our life is a series of constant decision making from the time, we open our eyes in the morning. Are we going to lie in bed, or are we going to get up and have some meditation? I mean, that's a decision. So our lives are full of constant opportunities to make decisions, and if the understanding in the intellect is perhaps not clear, then the decisions that we make will not actually be in our favor. And I think sometimes the reason why we kind of freeze and we don't know which decision to make is because of that inner fear that we might make the wrong decision. And of course, the mind is influencing this ability to understand things. And so these two are working closely together.
I think as you're talking, what's coming to my mind is that the word reasoning, that we use the intellect for reasoning. And also knowing, when you know exactly which direction to go when you take decisions. And so a lot of the confusions that happens on a daily basis is sometimes when you don't have the full knowledge of what's going on and what's going around you. And so in a sense, the intellect itself gets into that state of confusion instead of doing its job of reasoning. And the intellect is just an amazing organ of the soul, because it's so connected to our thinking faculty. The way we think is connected to the intellect. And that whole standing of what's right and what's wrong that comes from the intellect is a very powerful source of helping us to make the right decisions.
The intellect for me is very much like an operating system. Whatever happens in your computer is based on how your operating system works. And if I'm functioning as the basis of being a body that is physical, that has a limited lifespan, I'm going to see the world completely with that limitation. But if that operating system actually sees the self as an eternal being that's imperishable, that's peaceful and loving, then I'm going to operate based on those. So the decisions are going to come through that filter of that operating system. But more than that, we are really talking about the ancient Raj Yoga, which is really our main subject. And, of all the yogas, they say that Raj Yoga is Buddhi Yoga, the yoga of the intellect. So when we think about it, this is like a study to transform the self. But what are we transforming? We're just shifting understanding. So if you think about life, and we'll say, okay, I experience, or I know that somebody died. And at the point when I get the information somebody died, I can have two ways of looking at it. If I say that that's a body that has perished, then I know the soul is eternal. And so then there's no real loss, because the soul will go on into another body. But if I look at that person and say, that's a person who is died, immediately I experience loss. I won't get that person. I have, really created or experiencing something that's going to now miss in my life. So the same incident or the same situation, when it comes to death, I can either understand a process of progression and moving forward, or I can go into a slump and feel like now I've been deprived and something has been taken away from me. So the intellect plays such a beautiful role. And maybe another example that comes to my mind is that, if you have water filled halfway in a glass, one person will say, well, that's half full, and the other person will say half empty. Now that perception is actually going to change one's life completely. The one who's saying half full is actually going to feel, I have something. But the one that's saying half empty is going to go from a sense of deprivation. And maybe that's something we can look at our world today. The crisis that we're going through is because of the perceptions that we have created. And the intellect is actually where that understanding, attitude, reasoning is actually molded. And we can't really say, well, what can I do? I just understand like this. Understanding is not something which is fated or inherited. It's not an inherent thing. It's something that I have a choice, where how I educate myself, how I inform myself, what do I do? So anyone at this point can actually take a decision to start informing themselves differently and completely change the way the intellect functions. It's literally like buying a new operating system. So if I want to continue operating like a body, then I live with that understanding that this is who I am. I'm just the human, and this is my name, place, and address. But if I choose to rethink and ask myself, well, am I more than this body? Am I actually an energy that's eternal, immortal? And now let me see how that energy functions, and then see how I can start deciding to use my thoughts that come into my mind in a completely different way.
As you were talking, what comes to my mind is what influences all of this. And what comes up now for me is the topic of sanskars, how personality plays a big role in influencing the mind, influencing the intellect. And it is something that comes with us and is part of us for all time. Our personality. Sister Belinda, would you like to say something on that?
Thanks, Sister Fatima. Yeah, because that personality is really the director, and directs the quality of our thoughts, and then the ripple effect of that, the quality of our feelings, and the intellect, as Sister Usha was saying, the intellect, we have a choice of what perspective we want to hold. If we hold a spiritual perspective, then we start to make sense of our lives in a very different way. And this has an impact on the personality. So whilst we may sit with certain personality traits, or what we call sanskaras, that we would rather not have, we have this amazing option and possibility to actually transform those tendencies, which is what Sister Usha was talking about. We are really here to transform. And when we see that there's actually a recipe here, it gives us a lot of encouragement. Like anything, if you want to make a successful and delicious cake, you have to follow the recipe. And so the same thing here, when we look at that personality and we start to get to know ourselves and start to see why it is that certain things trigger us, and we might go into negative feelings of perhaps anger, hurt, worry, etc. This is all coming from those tendencies. And so here is a recipe that when we change our perspective and we start to adopt a spiritual perspective, which simply means that you start to see life differently. It's a higher perspective. It's like, seeing the lay of the land from ground zero, or seeing the lay of the land from the top of a hill. You get a far better perspective. And then we can start to work with ourselves and really understand, why we are the way we are and how we can start to make those changes within ourselves. And this is where our meditation plays such an important role.
Sister, I'm just remembering one thing that, we are talking about changing, but I also like us just to go back to something we spoke about yesterday, that the one thing we seem to want most is peace and love. And why is it that we want to go in that direction? Because part of our faculty, which is our habit, we actually innately are peaceful beings. And so before we have this acquired personality, which we may experience to sometimes get angry or be irritated or whatever it is, but right in the core of my being is actually a source, that really diamond-like self, which is peaceful, pure, loving. So when I know that actually I am peace, I am love, I am happiness, I am joy, I am wisdom, then actually it also helps the intellect to make decisions based on the fact that this is already what I am. Instead of looking at outside things and trying to meet the needs of the outside, I can also be a little bit more reflected, and with the understanding that as a spiritual being, I was really without any a blemish. My nature is peace and love. And so sometimes I think we actually need to undo habits, not gain new habits of being peaceful and loving, but if we undo the old habits by understanding that, yes, my original nature is peace and love, and focus more on that. And the nice thing about a habit is that if you use a habit, it becomes strong. But at the same light, if you don't use another habit, you can lose it. So you use a habit, it becomes powerful. If you don't use it, you lose it. So in the game of transformation, if I can identify which are my authentic values and my original habits, and choose those habits over the habits of the acquired, then that can also help me a lot to bring myself back to my eternal state.
Yeah, so important to remember how we started, that beautiful, pure state. So I think it's time for some meditation. Are you going to lead us, Sister Usha?
Okay, I can do that. So let's use this little meditation as a remembrance that let me take this moment and in a way, unwind all the different habits that I've acquired and go back to that very core of my being and come to that subtle, peaceful state where I see myself as a radiant being of pure light energy. As my attention rests on that form of light, it is as if I touch a switch and I awaken that pure intrinsic qualities of peace, purity, love, happiness, joy, wisdom, and power. Being peaceful is a choice, and I choose to focus my attention on the very core of my being. And as I allow my attention to stay focused on this eternal, imperishable being, I can naturally access the vibrations of peace and love that filters through my thoughts, words, and deeds, and allowing me not only to be peaceful when I'm silent, but allowing me to take that peace into my interactions. So let me choose today to be aware of the thoughts in my mind. And if I'm not happy with those thoughts, let me choose the thought that can shift into a state of peace and happiness and become the creator to change the outcome of the actions I perform. In this awareness of being the self, knowing that I, the soul, am creating with my thoughts, I can let go of that feeling of being helpless and move into a powerful state to make a choice, decide, and then act in a way that changes my inner feelings, my attitude, and my action. Om Shanti. So today's practice to know the self by understanding that the mind, intellect, and habits are faculties of the inner living light. I learn how to create thoughts in the awareness of my true self, develop the power to choose how to act, and sustain habits that are true to my core values. Om Shanti, and have a beautiful day, everyone. Thank you, sisters.
Thank you. Have a lovely
Thank
day.
you.